so today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to make your mark. We're going to talk about what civic action plan, civic engagement things students at UCR have done in history, especially recent history. We're going to talk about some other things as well, some motivation, and some of the structure of the way universities work. This is sort of our basic outline. You'll see the slide again as we go through the next pieces. So you'll see it repeated as we go on, so you can follow along with the lecture or the workshop. So I want to tell you a story about a student I knew when I was an undergrad. But first, I'm going to tell you about some other things, some basic examples. About 20 years ago, 17 years ago, the Associated Students of UCR sued the Board of Regents because there was a vote to allocate money from the ASUCR to pay for some lobbying efforts statewide. The UC Student Association, the United States Student Association. The Board of Regents felt that this was an improper use of student fees, and that students should not decide where their fees go. So your student government, years ago, sued, it went to the Supreme Court, and they won, saying that students should have the ability to allocate their fees in certain ways based off of their perspectives and opinions. If you think about universities in general, if you have other examples of different actions that students have done, what's a good example you might have heard of at universities in the last 50, 60 years? Some sort of change that students on a college campus are able to mobilize and work on.
Occupy movement.
Occupy movement's a good example. What about something a little older?
French Revolution in the 60s.
Okay, French Revolution in the 60s and the 60s, right? So both of those are things that college students were involved in. So there's lots of different examples, and we're going to go over a few right now. So a student that I knew when I was an undergrad, I went to UCR here, I was a member of honors many moons ago. So a student that I knew was really involved in campus activities and met some staff that worked for the Learning Center. Some pictures here of the Learning Center up until 1999-2000. So the Learning Center was in trailers. You might know the department now as the Academic Resource Center. These trailers were terrible. Holes in the floor, leaks from the roof. You literally could walk in and you may not know if you'd fall through the floor or not any given day. And the 5 days a year that it rains in Riverside, it would pour through the roof. The staff looked really happy in this picture, but their work environment was awful. And students would go there for tutoring, mentoring, study skills, other sorts of workshops, had to work in this really bad environment. So the students decided to band together and collect handbills. So the handbills at some point were actually posted up at the Academic Resource Center. And there's a sample here, you can see the picture, and these slides will be on iLearn soon as well. So it reads, what does the Learning Center do for students? It gives a bunch of examples. The quality of the image is not great. Study groups, one-on-one tutoring. What does the administration do for the Learning Center? Nothing, because it's a bad facility. Some propaganda, so to speak, right? So these handbills were collected, and students collected about 1,500 of these. If you don't believe me, there you go. 1,500 handbills, from all over campus. They walked into Chancellor Orbach's office. Does that name sound familiar? Science Library Orbach, right? Walked into Chancellor Orbach's office, demanding that the Chancellor switch offices with the director for one day, so the Chancellor could see how bad the facility was, and maybe put a new building on campus for the Academic Research Center, formerly known as the Learning Center. So they walk in, drop 1,500 handbills on the desk. What do you think the answer was? Good guess. So the answer was, well, I don't really know how we could do that. But the students had shown 1,500 signatures out of, at the time, maybe about 12,000 students, over 10% really wanted some change to happen. So the Chancellor did not switch offices for the day, but took a tour. During the tour, of course, there was a strong hope that the Chancellor would discover where the new holes in the floor, or that perhaps the Chancellor would experience some water falling on his head. Neither of which happened, but he did realize that this building was in terrible shape. They were bought from the military for like $1, and were already in bad shape at that time. So now today, because of students like you, the Learning Center is in this fabulous building, the Surge building, the first floor. Entirely because of students like you. Here's another example. Who knows what this building is?
Commons.
This is the Commons. What's there now?
Hub.
The Highlander Union Building. Good. So students, that's the very next year, so this is 2000, 2001, decided that in order to make UCR a more vibrant place to be, in order to provide a hub of campus life, pun was intended, that we needed to have a building for student organizations to meet, for events to happen on campus, for better food service, more food service. If you actually went to this building we used to sort of affectionately refer to it as the Pizza Hut Pagoda, so it looks like the logo, right? And there was literally no space to do anything, apart from a really large fireplace that people would sleep next to for days and days and days on end. Practically speaking. So these students organized a petition as well to put a referendum on the ballot. So a referendum on the student election ballot means, some of you might be familiar with this, that students are voting to tax themselves a certain fee per quarter to build a new building. So students just like you, over 20% of the students had to vote in that election to make it valid. Actually that year was about 32%. And overwhelmingly, most of the students said, yes, we'll pay $90 per quarter more, sorry about that, in order to build this fabulous building. And so you see this building now. This is actually the building, this is obviously not the real building. These are like watercolors. You can see the building as it was constructed, as it was designed. As it was designed, you can see it as we go. So you see the building as it was designed and as it was constructed. You see students walking around. You see actually the images that were drawn back then, this is back 2002, 2003, are pretty accurate for the most part to how the building looks now, even though the building only opened like 3 or 4 years ago. So you can kind of see it looks kind of nice, right? You see that as it was actually being constructed. There's actually a 30-second looping video on the Hub website where you can see the entire construction in 30 seconds. Believe me, it took a heck of a lot longer for it to be built. Pretty cool. These are students just like you that did this. You see it today. Now this being said, there's a lot more space now than there ever was before. A lot more meeting rooms. The students were really excited. I think students came back afterwards, students that were involved and saw the building as it was done. Thank you. And actually the building's pretty fabulous. Oh, look, it works. Thanks. Okay, so you can see the building as it looks today. Miles ahead of where it used to be. Eons ahead, I guess, probably, better use time references. Students just like you. So there's a quote I want to give you. Never doubt that a small, highly committed group of concerned individuals can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. You've probably heard this before. Margaret Mead, right? Pretty famous quote. There's other examples on campus as well. The Student Recreation Center in the early 1990s did not exist. And state funds could not be used to build a recreation center for students to use. Just like university state funds could not be used to pay for the Highlander Union building. Well, the only way those could be built is through student dollars. So students voted to tax themselves to open that building. And just a few years ago, voted again to expand it. So eventually there's going to be an Olympic-sized pool, which will be a first for the campus, at the rec center. Because students a few years ago voted to say, you know, this is a worthwhile investment for us. The state, the campus, the university cannot do this for us, we have to do this for ourselves. You have a lot of power as students on campus. You have a lot of power in the community too. If you were to go to City Hall and say, I really want this thing to happen, or I really want this vote to happen at the city council meeting, they may not entirely vote your way, but just the simple fact that you're going and you're there, they're going to say, oh my gosh, college students are involved. This is awesome. They're going to be excited to hear from you. They may not vote your way, but they're at least going to be interested to hear from you and hear your perspective.